Welcome back. I'm Sean.
I'm Brad.
This is my first watch.
This is my rewatch. The Wire, Season 2, Episode 7, Backwash.
Backwash. Disgusting title. Great episode.
Yeah, who comes up with that? We're starting off hot and heavy, man. We left D'Angelo last episode, sunken down, just his shadow underneath the door, and we don't even get to see him again. We're starting off with Bodhi right in the flower shop, and we don't exactly know what's going on, but it takes about 10 seconds, and then you're pretty clear. Bodhi walks into the flower shop. He's trying to get a flower arrangement, and the flower guy's asking, it's a family member or something, and Bodhi is he's not allowing himself to be known as someone that's friendly with D'Angelo, but they work together, and the guy gets what he's saying. He gets that this is some sort of a gang or street-related death, and automatically brings Bodhi to the back room where there's RIP and just very street-related flower arrangements.
Yeah, I've never seen like an AK-47 flower arrangement before now, so that's a first for me. And you make a good point. Yeah, like Bodhi makes it very clear, like this wasn't a friend, and he didn't even necessarily respect D'Angelo. He kind of like threw some subliminal shots at him, but he said, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. So he respects the death, but he doesn't respect the man that died.
Yeah, and he even says, you stand with him to the end or you're nothing yourself. And so the fact that he used to stand with D'Angelo, he can't now shit on his character. What does that mean for Bodhi, who stood with him this entire first season?
Very true. So again, like Bodhi is a character. I don't agree with all of the things he does personally, but just his kind of sense of morality, I really identify with. So I don't know. Bodhi's like, even though we haven't seen him enough, I was so hyped when he popped up on the screen. I was like, Bodhi. It's probably footage of me doing that. But I like Bodhi. He's my number 2 still this season.
Hey, you know what's interesting though? This is because you brought it up kind of a lot last season. This is the first time I really, really gave credence to when Bodhi says that, like, we weren't friends. He goes like, he says like we weren't really cool. I think he says like, he's my nigga and all that, but like it was the first time I kind of like realized that they weren't cool, that there really was that tension between them that you brought up a lot. And I didn't really, it's just kind of like I like Bodhi and D'Angelo was the main guy. So I didn't really think about the tension between them, how real it was. But Bodhi really confirms it here. He's not really down with them.
Yeah. And then you could tell that, and it's a common theme as we see everyone else react to D'Angelo's death, that the suicide really rubs a lot of people the wrong way, the suicide angle of it, which might have been, Stringer knew that probably going in.
Yeah, we see how quickly the word's gotten out on exactly what's happened with D'Angelo, because Bodhi tells the whole story to the guy in the flower shop, 20-year bid, probably couldn't handle it. And that's when we absolutely confirm for sure that this is D'Angelo that we're talking about here.
Yeah, 100%.
And the guy is asking, what do you want to do? And Bodhi doesn't exactly, you could tell there's like a missing character trait here from Bodhi to be able to truly emote what he's feeling, because he is sad. And he tells the flower guy that he wants the flower arrangement to look like the towers, the 221 towers that D'Angelo used to have. And he doesn't have any message to put on the flowers. He just looks the guy in the eye and says, make sure that them towers look how they do. And you could tell when he says that, it means something to him.
Yeah. And we see later on that Poot kind of like gives him a thumbs up for how it came out. So
we go to our credits and we get our quote, "Don't worry, kid, you're still on the clock." And that's from Horseface.
When I saw that, I was just trying to guess what's the situation that's going to be, and it ended up being quite the situation. So
Bunk and Beatty tell Jay Landsman, the sergeant at Homicide, that they've cloned the Doc's computer, and Jay is pissed. He tells them that if Rawls catches you guys on the computer playing video games with 14 open murders, he's going to flip his shit. And Bunk tells Jay that they've got a home down in the detail in the Southeast with Daniels. And Jay's like, oh, well then, why doesn't Daniels take the murders then? And Bunk says, hey, he's no dummy. He's just giving us a home, a place with no view. That's all. And
yes. Oh, sorry. So yeah, there was definitely 2 takeaways from this for me. It was like, I've never seen Jay that pissed since I've been watching. Correct me if I'm wrong from again the situation, but Jay was like smoke coming out of his ears pissed. So that was cool. Just to see that side of him. Cause he's always kind of like sucking up to Rawls and being a jokester. And being a hard ass, but this was him pissed. So that was interesting. And then I thought it was interesting that everyone is really pushing for Daniels to take these murders. It's like the last 2 weeks, take these murders. It's like, man, if I'm Daniels, why the hell would I ever take these murders? So
that's a point of someone in Daniel's life for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Beatty also doesn't really exactly know how this works in homicide. So when Jay just leaves, she's like, that's permission, right? He gave us permission, right? And the last thing they bring up is that Bunk tells Beatty that the docs need to think that they've gone back to normal, that there's nothing happening anymore. They need the docs relaxed so that they can do the dirt so that Freeman can catch them doing it on the computer. And Beatty's like, oh, how are we going to do that? And we'll get to see that in a second. Frog meets with Nick Sobotka on the street to negotiate the raw heroin that Nick got as payment from the last gig they just did with the chemicals with the Greek. And Frog wants an even split on the drugs after they sell it off. And he's dropping M-bombs and other words. And Nick tells Frog, he's very calm and cool. Nick tells Frog, hey, come here. And he lets him in on a secret that, hey, you're white. I'm also white. And wants to put an end to really the way that Frog's talking, I guess. And also, I guess kind of makes mention to the way that he ripped off Ziggy, that Frog ripped off Ziggy. Because he says he's not gonna do this without a $500 down payment from Frog on this package. Plus, he has to pay back the $210 that we know he still owes Ziggy from last episode.
Yeah, so you could tell that Frog put up kind of like a front at first, but then he almost like second-handedly says, "Oh, was it that package that last time that was good? That moved." So Frog was always interested in buying. I think he was just putting up a front. So.
Yeah, so Frog agrees, says he's going to have his man come by. And after the deal's done, you see like this old lady kind of look out her door and peek at Nick, and Nick looks back at her. And I can only assume that it's like, he feels bad now because he is screwing up the neighborhood.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what was your interpretation of that scene? Because that's exactly what mine was. It was this old lady. It was kind of the first establishing shot of when we were in that area, in that neighborhood. So it kind of told me as a viewer, we're not in the east side. We're in a white neighborhood, basically. And this old lady kind of overhears some of this drug transaction going on and just disappointed. Is that correct? Is that how you interpreted it too?
Yeah, and I think especially when Nick puts so much emphasis on, they're white, and I think he tries to place a difference between him and black drug dealers. And here, I think when you look at what people say about like the drug community and how it ruins the neighborhood, here's Nick now ruining the white community.
Yeah.
The DC guy from last episode that we know set up the hit on D'Angelo comes back to meet up with Stringer, collect the rest of his money, and he asks Stringer, like, everything to your approval, and Stringer says everything's good, and this guy confirms again it was his cousin that did the murder. And he asks, he has to ask Stringer if Avon knew anything about this. And Stringer, for some reason, tells him no. Just straight up tells him Avon knew nothing about it, but almost sends a little bit of a threat and says, if I were you, I wouldn't want any of this in Avon's ear. And the guy just says, like, Baltimore niggas off the hook. All y'all. I swear.
And I'm going to say that to all my Baltimore friends from now on. Y'all off the hook, all of y'all, because they are. But also, it's interesting, that little scene, because, right, I wasn't sure if Avon knew or not. And I kind of was under the assumption Avon okayed it from that hallway scene. If you remember from last week, I even said that last look between Avon and D'Angelo, I thought that was his last chance to save himself. So now finding out that Avon had no idea that this was going to happen, and he's hurt by it, it kind of paints a new picture to what Stringer did for me, and kind of makes me think he's in jeopardy. So
we now finally get to see what Avon's emotions are. Weebay and Avon, I guess, are having like a funeral meal, drinking big gulps. They're eating takeout, and Weebon tells Avon that D'Angelo's death is not on Avon. Avon's angry and thinks that D'Angelo killed himself just to get back at Avon so that they could have this situation right here that we're watching, where they're upset over D'Angelo's death. And Avon, kind of starts throwing away and says, man, fuck that. Like, he's weak. Avon says, I was good to him, but Weebay says, he rolled on us once. What if he was going to do it again? If he couldn't do the 20, that's kind of like now the narrative is that D'Angelo was too weak to do the 20-year bid, and that's why he killed himself.
It's just a really strategic and almost like brilliantly evil ploy by Stringer, because he's eliminated the threat, right? Because you don't know if D'Angelo was going to roll again. He wasn't happy. He wasn't talking to his baby mom. He was, he was distant, right? So there's that side of it, but there's also he's now made it seem like, D'Angelo did this. It fits his character. It was just a masterstroke by Stringer. And again, it makes me worried that it was too perfect, because I see wheels turning in D'Angelo's head every conversation he has about D as we go through this episode.
Herc and Carver trying to buy a mic at a tech shop, and the microphone is $1,500. The guy is willing to let them buy it for $1,250 for a police discount. Herc comes up with the genius idea to borrow the microphone on a 48-hour trial, but you have to put down a credit card for it. So the plan is to buy this microphone for $1,250, or put down a deposit on this microphone for 48 hours, try in what they're calling the urban crime environment, and then bring it back unharmed and get their money back.
Yeah, so Carver gets stuck with the bill at being the superior officer with stripes, and the credit card that's free. So
I need to point out that this is illegal. This is what's known as an illegal wiretap.
Oh, because they got no affidavit for the surveillance or anything like that, right?
No one knows this is happening. You ever hear of cops buying their own microphones? No, because you get it from the department after you get approval.
You make a great point. I didn't even think of that. And in any other TV show, right, that would be glossed over, but you're absolutely right. And thank you for pointing that out. This has not been, they didn't exhaust anything. So at least, they may have in their mind, but not legally.
Rawls tries to convince Daniels to take the open murders in the detail, and Jay's in the background. Rawls is oddly eating this orange, and Rawls tries to lay it on Daniels because he found out, Jay obviously told Rawls, that Daniels gave Bunk and Beatty what Rawls calls a home in the detail.
Yeah, so Jay, last time he told me, he went straight from being pissed in that room with Beatty and Bunk right to Rawls, and then this is the next scene we see. So what did you think of the oranges, man? Things like that I love on TV shows. It's so visually arresting. It's disgusting seeing the orange peels coming out of his hands and the juices pouring out of his mouth. I feel like they were just setting it up as Rawls is this snarling beast who wants to fuck his clearance rate and get it perfect, and everyone else is just like at his will, including Daniels. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this little orange thing. Maybe it was just something funny they wanted to do, but I just thought it was a great way to have Rawls close and open the scene. He's peeling it, and then the last thing, he's smarter than he looks, and takes a bite. So I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was gross. I thought it was purposely somewhat homoerotic.
Really? I didn't even think of that aspect of it.
Yeah. I thought it was purposely over the top.
It was definitely over the top.
And I think when you look at some of the things that Rawls, and the other cops like to talk about, joke about, I think it kind of fits in that kind of world of perverseness.
Yeah, I forget where I read it or where I heard it, but there's something inherently disrespectful, at least on TV, the way they translate it, when you're having a conversation with someone and you're eating and chewing while they're having, and this may be a reference to a certain executive producer we all know, but when you're eating and chewing and all these disgusting noises when you're in a professional setting, it's disrespectful. So
Daniels tells him no, by the way.
Daniels tells him no.
and Rawls' great line at the end, smarter than he looks. Beatty drives around to the docks. This is the plan for everyone to think that things have gone back to normal, that Beatty is back to work. She stops by Frank's office there, and Frank's like, hey, what happened to your black friend? And Beatty says, oh, everyone went back as far as I know. Case is done. The brass is finished with it. But she tells him that she's not going to be riding around the docks anymore. She's going to the Fairfield piers to check out chemicals, to patrol chemicals over terrorist threats and things like that. And so really signing off to Frank to tell him you're not going to see me anymore, but trying to put him at ease that no one's investigating anymore.
And Frank seems to buy it. He's like, you're too pretty for that, and darling. And he buys it. So it's a great plan by Bunk and Beatty to make people continue to put their radar down, basically.
Herc and Carver are setting up the mic in the tennis ball, and this is just a slick little line, but Herc is kind of going at Carver for being a sergeant and not being able to get the surveillance van in the Southeast District.
It's a throwaway line, yes, but we understand as a viewer that van is nowhere to be found, and Valchik doesn't even know where it is now.
Carver says to him, I've never seen it. Bunk and Freeman are watching the computers. It's boring. Beatty finally catches up and lets them know, hey, I rode around. They all think everything's good. Freeman is actually watching clean ships, that Horseface is not working. He wants to get a feel for this so that he knows when something goes wrong. The only way he can know when it goes wrong is to master when it goes right.
Freeman is such a good cop, man. It's just like he doesn't care how much minutia, how much like slow, boring work it takes. Every piece matters.
Well, and imagine, prior to this, the guy was painting little tiny miniature furnitures. Every piece mattered. Lots of patience, just sitting there for hours at a day looking through a magnifying glass. This is what he's built to do.
And I think that's why he's one of my favorite characters, because I envy his patience. I do not have a tenth of the patience that Freeman has. So
Frank is at a meeting about the future of cargo management, and it's all run by machines and computers in this new video of what the future holds. And they throw out the line that 4,000 people move 350 million tons per year. And this is when they also say they've reduced injuries by 60%. And this is when Frank turns to Nat and says, you can't get hurt if you're not working.
Yeah, for all the people who like hate season 2, you got to appreciate just like this is automation in 2020, and this conversation is still relevant to a lot of different industries. So it's just like, I don't know, it was enlightening, and everything that Sobotka was thinking, just the fact that immediately when he hears, oh, well, injuries have been reduced by this much, and he means, yeah, you can't get hurt if you're not working. Like, exactly. He understands that this automation is taking away more jobs from his people, and though it may be the future, he's not here for it. So I just thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, his goal is to get people like his son and his nephew hours.
Right.
They don't really care about how well the cargo comes on and off the ship.
Yeah, they care about the workers and the people doing the work, and this group of people in this meeting care about the top level, the high level view of everything, and how do we do it more efficient, right? Doesn't someone even whisper to him like, that's efficiency, Frank, or some shit? So
yeah, and this is Amazon of the waters.
It is. It definitely is.
Kirk and Carver are getting great audio out of their illegal wiretap. The lingo is catching on with Herc there. He says something like, this is the fucking bomb or something.
And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm wondering where they planted this tennis ball, and it's a very great job by the directors and the writers to not reveal exactly where this audio is coming from yet. So
until it's too late. Stringer now shows up at Brianna's house to pay his respects. Donette, D'Angelo's girlfriend, and Stringer's current girlfriend is there, and Stringer has to play it very careful with her. Keeps some distance, doesn't really show any type of romantic care or interest for her feelings. There's no, hey, how are you? He just looks like the boss of her boyfriend,
Yeah, I mean, Stringer maybe had 3 lines of dialogue in this whole almost 8-minute scene, and every time he's on screen, like, you're getting information, you're getting emotions, you're getting these character dynamics. So him and Donette, in my head, I'm thinking, does Donette know that Stringer was responsible? Does she suspect it? So just a lot of subtext without saying anything.
Stringer goes into Brianna's room to comfort her, and she is a mess, and he just puts his hand on her shoulder. She kind of pulls it in like she wants that comfort from him. But Stringer says nothing, and knowing what we know, creepy.
Do you think Stringer has any guilt? I think this is the one scene where again, he says so much in his face without having to say anything. I saw a hint of guilt just because you have a crying mother next to you. I mean, anyone's going to feel for that. I don't care how cold or heartless you are. I feel like that was a little bit of guilt amongst every other scene. Like, I don't think he felt guilty when he saw Donette. I know he didn't feel guilty when he talked to Avon beforehand. He didn't feel guilty in the car with the DC guys. But I feel like with D'Angelo's mom right there was a little bit of him was like, damn.
I think the best I can give Stringer for credit is that he didn't realize how tough this would be for everybody. I think when he looks at Brianna, he goes, oh, I didn't expect to have to be here doing this. This is tough.
Yeah, that may be what it is. It might not even be guilt at all. It might just be him not being prepared for that scenario. Mm-hmm.
Nick walks into the Union Bar, hands Ziggy his cash for packages and what Frog owed him. Ziggy is pitying himself because the packages, the drugs were supposed to be his thing, and Nick is better at that than him. Now, have you at any point caught what's going on at this point?
No. I mean, I saw the letter, and then when I see a letter, I'm thinking paternity, right? But
prior to that, you haven't noticed, right? Because so we'll go through this, and then I'll yell my big point that I wrote in all caps.
Okay, but no, I'm totally blind to all of what's going on right now. Besides the fact that Ziggy is clearly preoccupied by something more important than his usual stuff, and he doesn't care about anything but pulling out his dick and drinking. So that's all I knew at that point.
Off to the side, we can see Maui, the bully, and some of the other union guys. They are laughing and joking. Nick's kind of like looking at these guys like, the hell? And Ziggy tells Nick that he got the neighborhood girl pregnant and hands Nick the paternity papers, says he only had sex with her once. And Nick's like, Jesus, everyone had sex with her once. And there's a number to call to the lawyer. And Ziggy decides that he's going to get drunk before he actually calls the lawyer. And Nick decides that he's going to join him.
Right.
So at this point, you notice nothing, right?
I noticed the jukebox. I noticed there's a song playing. I'm not familiar with the song. And I noticed there's a lot of jovialness around this song. But personally, I'm not familiar with the song. So no, I didn't. I'm still lost. I'm basically Ziggy at this point, or Nick,
Prez comes out of the strip club. He meets up with Kima. And Prez says, whole lot of girls, whole lot of pretty girls with some kind of accents. So they think that they're onto the right path here. Prez did notice an older woman, about 40 or so, that looked like she maybe was in charge, going into the back room. This did not seem very stealth. Prez literally goes right from the club into this car with this woman who's driving him in the front seat, and then they just sit there.
Yeah, Prez looks very creepy coming out anyway, so I think that's what maybe was the stealth. He had the stealth of a perv. Like, he looked like a perv coming out, so no one's gonna let that guy go. So. But
also just Kima sitting, if anyone, I guess they're not looking for anyone at the club. No one's suspecting anything, but, for him to just walk right into this car with this woman driving him, and then they just sit there together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little suspicious if there was something going on. Mm-hmm.
This is also now our first time we're seeing Prez really do work out of the office, and it's not like what we saw him doing when he cold clocked that kid in the towers, but it's investigative work now. He's out and about, which we didn't get in him before.
Yeah, I gotta say about Prez, right? So they introduced him as a piece of shit, and he's redeemed himself as a character through his ambition and through his diligence of working with Freeman. So now I kind of want to see I want to see him go back. I want to see him regress a little, because now it's like, all right, Prez isn't perfect, and they're making him too perfect for me. So I want to see what's next for Prez, and if he has a little negative things come up in his story.
Okay. Daniels explains to Marla, his wife, that Burrell is the one that reached out to him on this case. And Marla tells Daniels that Burrell will never forget that Daniels crossed him. And Daniels now is a little bit delusional, talking about, bragging almost how Rawls came to him earlier, wanting him to take this case, these open murders, and that he turned him down, and that he's doing exactly what Burrell wants him to do, and that I'm playing their game this time. He's kind of in la-la land.
Yeah, Daniels is kind of, like you said, delusional a little bit, naive. Like, he said to his wife, he says, when I was in the basement, it made sense to quit. But now he's in a position, and after the conversation with Freeman last week, he could solve 12 murders, right? I think he understands that now, and I think the conversation with Freeman gave him a whole new outlook that he hasn't even reconciled with his wife yet, that he loves the job and he wants to solve these cases because that's what's in his blood. He's a good police by heart. So
14.
What did I say? 12.
Nat tells Frank this time is Ott's time, and they're talking about the secretary-treasurer position. Apparently, There's an agreement where they switch between black and white officers, I guess, like every year. And this time is Ott's time to take over for the next election. And Frank is begging Nat for one more year to finish what he started. He's saying it's the Grain Pier, it's the canal. He wants to get the dredging done. We know it's the money that he's been funneling.
Right. And then if someone else is in charge of that money, there goes the relationship with the Greeks, right?
Right. Frank picks up the phone now and calls some guy named Brucey, who we will see in a minute.
Okay.
Kim and Prez are still in the parking lot watching the girls, and the girls are getting ushered out of the club into a van. Back at the bar, Nick asks Ziggy, "When'd you get these papers?" And Ziggy got them in the mail, these paternity papers. And just as there's like a break in the bar, and he asks, when'd you get these papers? And just as that happens, the jukebox kicks back in. And Ziggy says, he got the papers in the mail. And Nick says, last time when I heard about this from my buddy, a sheriff delivered these papers. And the union guys are still laughing. This is the moment that I wasn't sure if you noticed that Maui's been feeding the jukebox the entire scene in this bar.
I didn't notice. I noticed that he was by it, but I didn't notice that he was specifically feeding it. So, okay.
So Nick looks at the papers and he notices everyone laughing, and he decides to call the phone number for the lawyer that are on the paternity papers. And Maui's phone starts ringing. Ziggy doesn't get it. Nick has to tell Ziggy, hey, Maui got you. They've been playing Love Child in that bar the entire scene since Nick walked in to hand Ziggy the money, and Ziggy was going on about how the packages were his thing. Love Child is playing that entire time.
Right. And then me not knowing the song, that didn't register to me, but as soon as the payoff with the cell phone, it all clicked. Mm-hmm.
And the whole bar kind of joins in on singing Love Child now as Ziggy finally realizes it takes a while. Nick has to spoon feed him the joke. Right. And Nick even has to laugh at this.
Yeah. Nick finds that amusing too.
Kima and Prez, or I don't know, maybe we get a name for them. Prima?
Yeah, that's what you called them last week.
It is what okay. Mm-hmm. So Prima follows the van of girls to this hotel. Prez looks to see where does the elevator stop, and they all get off on the 6th floor, which means they're all together. Bingo. Okay. Freeman gets the notice for Horseface's posting for the next day on the docks. So Freeman wants to set up surveillance with different faces at the ports, since him and Bunk and Beatty are pretty well known there, and he's going to get everyone in the detail involved. And Beatty even asks, should we tell the lieutenant? And Freeman says, the less the lieutenant knows, the better.
Right, in terms that we're chasing a murder, or that he's getting closer to a murder, yeah.
Nick meets up with Frog and New Truck. Carver and Herc are listening and watching and taking pictures of the tags. Frog starts playing with the ball now. It is tucked into a paper cup on the street, and Frog takes the ball out, starts bouncing it around, so now the sound is getting messed up. Nick and Frog finish up their business, and Frog tosses the ball down the street. Carver leaps down the stairs, out of the building, goes chasing this ball into the street, where it misses a couple cars, but doesn't miss the truck.
I gotta tell you, a little diversion, but I felt for Carver so much in that scene because I was in a similar situation not too long ago where I left my cell phone on top of my car, forgot, because I was putting stuff in the car, pulled off, and then all of a sudden as I'm on the highway, because I drove for like a mile with it sitting on my roof, and then when I got on the highway, or not highway, but freeway, multi-lane freeway, I heard a thud, and I'm like, that was my phone hitting the ground. So I went out, and I was just like Carver in the middle of the street, dodging cars to go pick up my cell phone right before a truck hit it. Luckily, my cell phone survived, but the tennis ball was not so lucky.
Yeah, tennis ball not so lucky. Freeman gives everyone their posts on the dock surveillance. It's very organized. I want to come back to this later.
Yes.
Nick hands the dirty cans to Frank, the list of dirty cans that are coming in from the Greek, and Frank hands them right away to Horseface. And Horseface even has to ask, there's nothing alive in these, right? And Frank tells Horseface, he says, if they don't come and get these cans right away with the truck, you throw them back into the stack and you bang on them to make sure there is nothing alive in there. Nick goes to take off, and Frank asks Nick how he's doing, and Nick doesn't even really give him an answer. And I thought, a variant of wire speak, we've heard the term keep it close. Keep it close. But Frank says to Nick, stay close.
Oh, yeah, there's a little different. Yeah, I didn't even put the distinction between the two. But yeah, same idea. Stay close, keep it close, yeah.
Tells Nick, don't do anything I wouldn't do. Of course, we know that he is dealing drugs now.
Right. So Nick has gone from stealing cameras, which Frank was aware of, to wholesale selling heroin.
And makes mention also that Nick hasn't been getting hours. He hasn't been around the docks lately.
Right. Very true.
We go to D'Angelo's funeral. Very sad scene. And still, Brianna crying with Stringer right behind her, hand on the shoulder. Prop Joe and his crew are off in the background, and they're kind of watching off to the side. Hard to tell what the vibe is there. Maybe they were just trying to make mention to Stringer, like, we want to talk to you after the funeral. Could be that maybe they know something seems a little shady. Hard to say. We do also get, like you mentioned, Poot acknowledging to Bodie how tight the 2-2-1 flower arrangement was. And you can see, the idea of Bodie meant something to Poot and to, I'm sorry, the idea of
D'Angelo.
Yeah, meant something to Poot and Bodie, even if they weren't friendly.
Yeah, and I don't think Poot had as much animosity towards D as Bodie did as well. So
yeah, remember Poot's the one that went to D'Angelo about Wallace in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Prop Joe has a proposition for Stringer at the funeral. And what he wants to do is he wants to share the Greek's product. He confirms, this is right off the boat, raw, and wants to share this product, which he knows Avon doesn't have, in exchange for some of Avon's real estate, which is prime territory. And this is where we get it'd be great to get a prequel. But Stringer says, we fought for those towers, the Rayford brothers, Big Dennis Woodson. And so he can't give the word to give up territory. He's got to check with Avon directly.
Yeah, I love that little bit of exposition, and we rarely get that. We haven't got that in a while, at least from The Wire, right? It's all been moving the story forward, but we get to look back at how important this territory is. We know from a strategic standpoint that they control the west side, right? Because Prop Joe's east, right?
Right.
But also they fought for it. They put a lot of work in to get those towers. So he doesn't want to give it up. Avon doesn't want to give it up, and Stringer kind of had an idea that he didn't want to give it up too before he even talked to Avon, I feel like. So
Frank meets with Brucey that he called on the phone, and they're going over the budget for dredging. And this is what Frank has been paying for to see his projects put in that are going to open up the water space and bring more ships in. And the Grand Pier, which we've heard a lot about, is in there, but there's nothing else in the budget. And Frank is pretty mad about that. And he says it's all just talk. And Frank asks Bruce, what's your son do? And Bruce tells him a little bit about his son and how he sends his son to Princeton. And Frank says, oh, what do you want to do with that? And he says, oh, he'll probably just do whatever he wants. And Frank makes a comparison by talking about another story about a guy on the docks that the father of a neighborhood kid, and the father stole Tang off the boat thinking that it was cognac. And I guess back then it was new for the space program. And so like we hear about with sneakers, right? Want to be like Mike. If you drink Tang, you can be like the astronauts. You can be an astronaut too. And Frank says, what do you think they grew up to be? And he tells Bruce they didn't grow up to be astronauts. They grew up to be stevedores, port workers, dock workers, the same thing their dad was. And he says, something tells me that your son's going to grow up to squeeze a nickel out of people just like you're doing to me right now.
Yeah, so it was Frank is a great storyteller. And immediately when he sold the Tang story, it was one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode, because he's really explaining how, look, man, we're some blue collar working class people, and you're taking money out of my pocket right now with me the intentions of investing in something for my people later. And now you're telling me I might not even get that. So you're a thief. He thinks he's stealing from me. So I mean, I don't necessarily agree with Frank's reasoning. I understand the business side of everything, but I relate with what Frank's saying.
Yeah, and he's really angry and fired up about this video that he just watched earlier in the day, and tells him, I saw the plans for the future. It doesn't include work for my guys. It's robots taking our jobs. Right. And he throws this shoebox of money to Bruce, and says, hey, they're your size, Brucey, and pulls him in close and tells him, like, I'm not just talking about the Grand Pier here. I'm talking about the canal, and you're going to talk about the canal. So someday, somehow, some way, this thing gets built so that there's a future for my family and people like me.
Yeah, and you see he has a needle to his throat. It's very threatening, but you tell he means business because this is the future of his family and his industry.
Horseface is checking in the cans, and he's going to do the dirt right away because he thinks it's safe. And so Freeman's watching right away. As soon as Horseface loses the can, punches it in, Freeman gets the troops rolling. He gets everyone into position, and he's got Beatty there to tell him exactly how it's supposed to go down, whether or not they're doing dirt or if it's just a mistake. And Sergey is picking up the can, and Beatty tells them if he goes by the checkpoint, then they're doing dirt. And that's exactly what Sergey does. And Freeman is able to make sure that everyone is in position, and they start the trailing of this truck. And I wanted to compare this to the way that Daniels went out last season to tail Avon.
Really? Oh, so is that what you wanted to bring up in terms of the structure? Because What Daniels did last season was really all for show and all for, I just want to get a look at the guy. There was no strategy behind it per se, whereas this was very strategic. He had Kima in place in one place, and then once Kima lost her line of sight, Bunk jumps in. Bunk, you know what I mean? So is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, and Avon and Stringer joked about it afterwards at the bar last season. And Stringer says, where were you going to take him? And Avon says, I was going to take him to get a haircut. I was getting the shape up. And, we wondered, we said, where did Daniels think that they were going? He was going to take him right to the crime spot? And little do we know, with this well-organized tale that Freeman has worked out with his crew and letting them know exactly where he wants them to be and what to do and keeping constant communication, these guys literally lead them right to the dirt.
Yeah.
They take this truck to a warehouse that Bunk is able to sit outside of, light a cigar, and stake out. Again, not very hidden, but I guess good enough for TV.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they were kind of out in the open, but I just used the assumption that she has a really long telephoto lens or whatever, so that's what allows it to be so non-conspicuous. So
Stringer goes to visit Avon in prison. This is their first time now really being able to talk about D'Angelo's death, and Stringer asked Avon if he knew that D'Angelo was using.
That's a key. I'm sorry to cut you off, but Stringer is a strategist in every conversation he has. It's like he's planting that idea in Avon's head that he's a user, he's a weak person. This is in his character to kill himself. So
yeah, and they talk very freely. Again, you asked this again, like, how are they able to get away with this? Like, aren't they listening in on the phone calls or whatever? And they talk very freely about, after we did our thing with the security guard, D'Angelo had stopped. And so there's no fear of them getting caught, even though they've just struck a plea deal. And you would think that people would be listening to see if he's going to talk about doing this with his partners. No one is. They have zero fear of this.
Right. Yeah. So that's a little bit of I've accepted that this phone is bought, or he has an arrangement where he can talk freely to Stringer and D'Angelo's mom about anything on his phone.
Yeah. But Avon is a mess about this. I mean, the way that it all went down, he can't fathom that it was so bad for D'Angelo that he took his own life. And Stringer kind of stutters a little bit and wants to know, what are they saying in here in the prison? And Avon confirms what Stringer wants to hear, what Stringer's hoping, that he just killed himself, put a rope around his neck and sat down. And Stringer says, how are you going to stop a man from doing that? It's not on you. And I thought if the suicide were legitimate, I thought that this was Stringer being a good friend to try and relieve Avon of this burden. It's just that Stringer's the one that made it happen in the first place.
Exactly. And then you made a very good point, which I want us to talk about, is Stringer stuttering. Stringer doesn't stutter. Stringer doesn't make mistakes. Stringer knows every word is measured, and he barely talks. So that little break in. So what are this? Like, that might have been enough for Avon to even pick up. I don't want to discount Avon and how smart he is. I always see his wheels turning in every scene, and I'll see as the season unfolds if he figures out what really happened. Because I think he's gonna. That's my prediction.
They only have a little bit of time, I guess. So as soon as they're done talking about D'Angelo, Avon moves on and says, what about that other thing? And Stringer has to tell Avon, that product in Atlanta is shit, and they're gonna have to discount it. And Avon's like, no, we're not gonna discount it. He says, what, I look like Kmart? And Stringer brings up the Prop Joe offer, and Avon right away says no. And
it's a non-starter for Avon. He doesn't
non-starter, and says, we're going to get through this. So he's really leaving Stringer with zero options on the business front.
Yeah, this is the first mistake, not the first mistake, because getting D'Angelo locked up was a mistake. In season 1, but this is maybe the second mistake I'll say that I've seen Avon make. And I don't know if it's a mistake. I haven't seen past this episode, but I think it's a mistake because if your product is shit, you have all the competition. Literally, they talked about it in multiple scenes. They're walking from west to east to go get better drugs. It's like you're going to lose your territory one way or another, right? The territory is going to leave you, which they are, or you're going to lose it to a better product. So I just feel like Avon being inside and having such attachment to holding onto those towers and not seeing the real what's going on outside, it's making him make a bad decision in this particular instance.
Kima relieves Bunk at the stakeout outside the warehouse. Prez, Freeman, and Beatty fill Rhonda Perlman. Welcome back, Rhonda, into season 2. They fill her in on the docs and what they've been working on, and they want to get a wiretap. And Rhonda has to tell them that if we're looking at prostitution here, which is all they're really able to get from what they've seen coming in and out of that club, that there is no wiretap readily available for crimes of prostitution or conspiracy to commit prostitution, which kind of surprises Beatty a little bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? It's like the law cares more about catching. I mean, not literally, but that's kind of what Beatty takes from it. It's the law cares more about catching drug dealers than catching sex worker crimes. Mm-hmm. So
Nick tells Amy, his girlfriend, to start looking for 2-bedroom apartments, and that he got a new job as a warehouse foreman for some Greek dude's appliance store. And
Nick's an idiot. I'm sorry, man. Nick is no better than Ziggy. He's just a little older, honestly.
Yeah, I think when you hear this and he's telling her he's getting $500 a week that he can guarantee, and they're going to start to pay down the truck, yet he's already bought the truck. And, I feel so bad. He's selling this pipe dream. Really, McNulty saying that he's retired, done drinking, done whoring to his soon-to-be ex-wife. Daniels telling Marla that, he's got all the power in this scenario and that he's
playing their game.
And then in this case, that they're going to be able to get a nice place, out in the county. And he's got this awesome job that's working out of nowhere. All the guys here really are selling these pipe dreams.
Yeah, and then they believe him themselves, a lot of them. That's why I just think Nick is not smart. He's not a smart guy. He's like Ziggy is a dumbass, but Nick is dumb. He maybe not a dumbass, but he's dumb. So
well, it's funny because we spent the whole first part of the season with Ziggy explaining things to Nick like cell phone or digital cameras, the internet,
Google searches or whatever.
Google searches. Mm-hmm. Now, Nick, in this episode, Nick had to kind of wise up Ziggy to street smarts and that, hey, dude, you're getting played. This isn't how you get a paternity suit. Mm-hmm. And it's almost a comeuppance, and we're even seeing, him be successful at selling this package off to Frog. But now he falls right back with just this, oh, you're so dumb, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Nick. My favorite Sobotka is Frank by far. So
Carver and Herc tracked down the truck that they found at the corner with Frog, and they realized, well, Herc already saw it, and he just says, oh, it's Nick Sobotka, and Carver has to say, hey, Beavis, that name mean anything to you? That's the name of the guy we're supposed to be chasing. And they can't wrap their head around exactly what's the deal with this Nick Sobotka versus the Frank Sobotka. They got to be related. Are they related? They're not quite sure.
Yeah. It's interesting that Herc always has to kind of tell Carver the obvious sometimes.
Carver has to tell Herc.
Oh, excuse me. Carver has to tell Herc, right?
And once Herc realizes this, then he kind of starts formulating this plan, and he says he wants to use the tennis ball illegal wiretap as a CI, as a confidential informant. They want to say that a person gave them the information about Nick Sobotka working on this corner.
Okay, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, and he says that he wants Herc tells Carver that he wants Carver to put down this fuzzy Dunlap thing that he calls the tennis ball, put this down as a CI. And
wow,
Carver's like, no. And Herc says, no, you have to be the one to do it. He says, you're out 1250. Wouldn't you at least rather get this case? Herc tells Carver he trusts you more than me. And we already know that he does trust Carver because that's why he let him back onto the case. So not only is Herc trying to convince Carver to do a little dirt, but Bunk is now trying to convince Freeman to give a little push to Daniels and said, oh, these cases have to be worked. It's not going to happen in homicide. Freeman, you got to go to Daniels. You got the smell of wisdom on you, brother. And we all got a role to play.
Yeah, so it's not the most honest conversation, but it is an honest conversation because they all do have a role to play. And Freeman got out of the basement, not literally. He was in the pawn shop unit, but he got out of where he was because of his talent. But now that he's a part of homicide, he's got to get in where he fits in. So I get where Bunk's coming from, and getting this clearance rate getting these murders off their plate is going to help everybody in their department. So I totally get where Bunk's coming from. I wasn't sure how Freeman would respond, though. I wasn't sure if he would necessarily play along.
Kima is still outside of the warehouse and getting a little tired, but it pays off because a car comes rolling up, and it's Prop Joe pulling up to the warehouse, shaking hands with Sergey. Now, I think it's important to know, what does Kima know at this point? What does she know about Prop Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's aware that he is a contemporary of Avon's, right?
Right. So her interaction with Prop Joe is from them wiring up Omar at the fountain for the parlay with Stringer.
Exactly.
That Prop Joe set up. So she knows that Prop Joe is some sort of an East Side drug guy. Ziggy is still in the Union Bar drinking with the guys, and he's pissed at Mally for making a fool out of him, and the other guys are kind of egging him on, and come on, Zig, you could definitely take him. Love Child is still playing in the background of the bar. It's been nonstop, and before anything can happen, someone busts into the bar, says man down, and everyone runs out to the docks. There's a guy down there, New Charles is his name, and his leg is crushed by a box. He's pinned under this. Frank gets everyone to help lift this box up and pull New Charles out from under the box. They give him a hit of the cigarette, a drag of a little cigarette, and this is where we get our quote from the beginning of the show from Horseface: "Don't worry, kid, you're still on the clock."
Yeah, I thought they did a great job of foreshadowing this with the meeting earlier where they talked about the reduction in injuries. It kind of just puts in the back of your head how dangerous this job can be every day. So that was well done. And then you could tell Frank's just broken up about this. Frank really cares about his guys, and this sucks.
Ziggy, too. Ziggy's pretty upset.
Yeah.
Freeman tells Daniels that this case needs to be worked by good police, and the detail has the pattern already with the DNRs and the clone computers. They're the best equipped to take these murders. Daniels is reluctant, but Freeman tells him, these girls really died in that can. This is a real case, real murder. Those girls really died. And Freeman says, you might eat those open murders. That's the negative. But if you let this pass, you got to ask yourself how you want to live your day to day. And you and I talked about this after the episode, and really what Freeman was hammering in there.
Yeah, and then Daniels, I like Daniels, of course, but it's a self-preservation argument versus anything, right? It's like, does taking these murders, is it really gonna help you? And I think in his head it will, because if he solves them, and I think he thinks he can and he wants to, it will in his head. I think Freeman's convinced and changed his whole outlook from, let me just give Valchek what he wants and get out of the way, versus, okay, I can solve 14 murders. So it's more important than Valchek at this point for him.
Frank stops by New Charles' house. All the Union guys are outside, and it almost, looks like a funeral.
Yeah, it's like, his career's over. So,
and this is when Nat goes into the house with Frank, and again, like a funeral, when someone passes, and maybe something you would see in like Sopranos, but Frank hands an envelope to New Charles's wife, and she opens up the envelope in front of Nat and sees it's just a stack of money, and Nat kind of looks mortified, like, whoa, what are we talking about here? What is all this?
And even she looks surprised by it. It's almost as if she didn't expect that to be in there.
Yeah. They walk out of the house, and Nat tells them about the name New Charles. And again, just so many Doc stories that this one I actually understood, but New Charles's name is New Charles because his first day at the docks, another guy named Charlie died and had to be scooped up with a shovel off the docks. And ever since then, this guy has been New Charles.
It's almost like he was like destined to be injured.
And here we go. He's going to lose the leg.
Yeah.
Which means his job, his life, his career is over.
Yeah. And at the end of the scene, we see him kind of come up to Frank and ask him, where's the money from?
And Frank doesn't say a word. Daniels walks right into Rawls' office and just tells him, I got your murders, but what I need from you, I get. No bullshit, no arguments. And Rawls agrees.
What do we think of this scene? I think, what's going on in Rawls' head right now?
Got him.
Yeah?
He just doesn't want the murders.
I think so, because the last scene ended with Rawls saying he's not as dumb as he looks. And I almost feel like at the end of the scene, Rawls is thinking the opposite, like maybe he is as dumb as he looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that he respects Daniels a little bit, but I don't think Rawls even cares truly what happens as long as I don't think he cares if the murders get solved. He just doesn't want the blame.
Fair enough.
McNulty is having a nice little gathering with Elena, his soon-to-be ex-wife, and they're sitting on the back steps as the kids are playing in a tent. And McNulty tries to get a little bit mushy with her, and she puts a stop to it and says, "Listen, I can't trust you. I can care about you and be friends and maybe even want you to be happy, but how could I ever trust you again?" She just takes off and leaves him behind. And I think that's maybe a pretty solid definitive for him of they're not getting back together.
I gotta give credit again to the writing and the strategic introduction and reintroduction of scenes and characters. I mean, we didn't see McNulty all episode, and we're nearing the end of the episode, and we finally get this one scene with McNulty, and it's very, very, I think, strategic that they put that in the same episode as we see Rhonda reappear, right? So I don't think that's a coincidence at all.
You know, I got to ask, you know, do you think it was strategic to put it right next to Daniels with what Daniels is going into, because that's our final scene. We go right into Daniels and his marital problems now that he's deciding that he's going to take this case. He tells Marla, like, I can't help it. I love the job. But Marla says the job does not love you. And Daniels tries to give her a compliment by saying, hey, listen, you know, I love that you're thinking so many far steps ahead of me. That's what I fell in love with. And Marla replies, you know what I fell in love with? Your ambition. What happened to that guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite, yes, to answer your question about it, it is very strategic to put those next to each other. But also, I don't agree with Marla here. You know, I think it is ambitious, and I think it's his ambition is what Freeman played to, that Daniels wants to solve these murders, and Daniels thinks he can solve these murders, and he sees that. I think that's playing to his ambition and his good police side. So Marla may not understand that and may think he's just here doing grunt work for a bunch of cops that don't care about him and want to use him as a pawn. But I think in Daniel's head, he honestly, it's his ambition which is driving him right now, and not the lack of.
Well, you know, I think the difference with guys who are good police is that the work, the ambition will come with the work. The accolades will come with the work.
Yeah.
Where I think people like Rawls, Burrell, and the way that Marla is thinking is the work doesn't matter. You need to put yourself in a position to succeed around people who are going to help you succeed. And I don't think Marla believes in the idea of Burrell forgetting about what Daniels has done, no matter what Daniels does. Daniels has his old school mentality of I'll work for it. And Marla's told him back before in last season, the game is rigged. You've already lost. There's nothing you can do to rise underneath Burrell. Doesn't matter how good but Daniels can't escape that allure. And it's the same with Freeman. They can't escape that allure of good casework. They think that it's going to matter to somebody out there.
Can we get the rights for Allure Jay-Z for the end of this episode? I feel like after you said that, that's the perfect song to close out with. Let's let's go purchase the rights to that, because the allure of the job is really what's, you're right. Daniels wants to solve cases. That's what he cares about more than making rank, just like Prez said. So,
but also the belief that solving these cases will bring the rank.
Right, yeah, he thinks the work will get him what he wants, and that's not necessarily true. So, I mean, I like Marla. She's whatever Kima's fiance's name is. I don't even care to remember her name, but she's Cheryl. But no, she's that. I disagree with Marla in calling out his ambition, but I understand 100% where she's coming from and agree with the reasoning. So.
But, you know, you say you disagree, but you got to wonder, like, what is the ambition? Is it real ambition? If his ambition is to do good police work so that he can get rank, who have you seen on this show so far do that?
Nobody, but...
So then, isn't she dead on correct?
Right? He's getting his own major crimes unit. That's... How so? If he's getting it... Go ahead.
Because he's a pawn right now. He thinks he's going to get his own major crimes unit, but he hasn't. That's contingent on him solving this case. He hasn't gotten anything. The guy he was patched, she said, you know, fools half your age are going to be making, you know, colonel and major. Look at the guy that just passed him up, the white lieutenant that just passed
from season
him up
one.
Last episode from season one. What did that guy?
guy.
That guy was carrying Presbeluski his entire run.
Mm-hmm.
What did he do to make major?
No, Marla's right. Marla's right. I understand what Daniel sees, and he sees I get my own unit. Burrell's gonna be out of my hair because he may be commissioner, right? Which might not be true either, right? It might be he's more in your hair, but just in Daniel's head, I see the vision he wants, and that's why I get both sides. Marla's right, literally, but I see what Daniel wants to achieve, and I think it's ambitious. Be it naive or not, it's ambitious that he would love to go down that path and get his own major crime unit and solve good cases with independent of the politics. I think that's what his ambition is. So that's the part I agree with, and that's the part I can relate to. So,
all right. So then when we look at our crews, we've got we've got the cops who I think are starting to come together here a little bit. They've kind of cracked the code of the trucks by cloning the computer. They've found the can. They found a lead, a nice little thread to the prostitution ring. They still need to figure out how to actually get some sort of legal precedence here to start making moves, but they've done some things.
Yeah. I don't know what the Barksdale Crew didn't succeed any. Yeah, Stringer's plan succeeded, but they lost a soldier. Granted, he may have snitched down the line, but it just hurt the morale of the whole crew. Like, to have to go to a funeral, they're losing. Their weight sucks. Like, it's not selling. It's not doing well. They got people coming for their territory, Prop Joe. So, I mean, it's not the Barksdale Crew, and I don't think it's Sobotka and the Docs either. It's got to be the cops who won this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the port's also suffering a lot of losses with, similar to the Barksdale Crew. There's a major split going on, it feels like, with what Stringer did without telling Avon, but also with
Frank.
With Frank and Nick not telling him that he's working with the Greeks to sell these drugs.
Yes, very much so. So I think in that regard, yeah, the cops won this week because there's so much dissent going on between the two other factions. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot in this episode. But
it was so much fun. So much fun. I feel like we just started talking. Honestly, I didn't realize we got through the whole episode so fast. So
yeah. So all right, that's episode 7. So the next one will be season 2, episode 8, Duck and Cover.
Duck and Cover. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw the thumbnail, Bodie shooting. So I'm excited for this. So
we'll have to find out.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm Sean. This is my first watch.
I'm Brad. It's my rewatch. See you next time.